Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the True Life Podcast. We got an awesome show for you today. We are here with the one and only Natalia Varela. I hope I said that correctly.
Yeah, you did.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. She's an audio artist. She's currently working for Electronic Arts, a sound designer, a sound engineer. She's worked with major global brands, creating engaging audio visual content for TV, social media, radio, film. She is the first Salvadorian to win a WIFT award, which is the Women in Film and Television. That sounds awesome. We're going to learn all
Yeah.
about it. And Natalia, thanks for spending some time with me this morning. Did I leave anything out there?
No, I think you covered a lot. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you. It's such an interesting time to be alive. To
Yeah.
as much as calamity seems to be out there, there seems to be a lot of opportunities, and it seems to me that you have found a unique way to live your life, and I wanted to help amplify that message, and maybe you can inspire some other people to do some things like that. So maybe we could just start off with where you're from and how you got to be where you are.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm originally from El Salvador. It's in Central America, for those who are not familiar with it. um, and yeah, so I moved to Europe when I was like 14, 15, just because of my dad's job. So we had to move around a lot. So I lived like 5 years in the Netherlands. Then I lived a couple years in Belgium. Then I went to uni to study sound in London, UK. And after that, I went back to El Salvador, and just like you, I ended up meeting my husband and staying longer than I planned, and started a family. And then we decided to move here to Canada just a few months ago. So we're here in Montreal.
It's amazing to me. How big of like I have learned in my life that traveling at a younger age, if you're lucky enough to do it, has long lasting effects on the way you see the world. Did you find that to be similar?
Oh, absolutely. Especially coming from a country like El Salvador, it's a very like conservative country. So um, I can see the difference when I go back with people that haven't left, and how they kind of still view the world. And it's not that it's bad; it's just different.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it does open up. I think you can become a lot more empathetic because you just realize this. There's just so many different people. When I went to school in the Netherlands, I went to an international school. So like in my class, there was people from like all over the world. It was like we had people from Israel, from China, from Africa, from South America. You know, they had me from El Salvador. I think I was the first.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, we just all got along together. And that's just so enriching. Like you just learn that just everyone's coming from a different place. And it's not really your place to tell everyone what to believe, what to think. You just got to accept that everyone's just kind of in their own path. And I think like in today's context, that's so important with so much like I don't know, like in social media, you can find nowadays like a lot of like people really like defending like a I don't know, like I don't want to say an agenda, just like a view, like their own view, like this is how people should think. And it's like no, everyone has their own right to think how they think, you know. They're just on their own path. And I think when you travel, you really just get to like experience that, just really um, just learn that everyone is just different, and the best you can do is just accept them.
Yeah, that's really
Yeah.
well said. And it sometimes it can be hard because especially if you live so long in one spot, you really begin to build up like that cultural residue on you, and you begin to see things in a way that people have always seen them. And like you said, it's not bad, it's just different.
Yeah.
And so how much of effect did that have on you choosing to become someone who's working with sound? Like what inspired you to do that?
Um. Okay. So honestly, like how I got into sound, I don't know. I don't know if that inspired much. I think it was just me being like a teenager, and I loved going to concerts. Like
Nice.
I would just any money that I could like save, I would spend it on concerts. I loved it. So I thought like, okay, if I like being in concerts so much, why don't I work in concerts? And I wanted to be like a live sound engineer. um but then when I started uni, I realized I didn't like that. Like, it's not the same like going to concerts than working in one as a sound engineer. It's absolutely stressful. It's like you don't enjoy the concert. So I was like, yeah, I don't like this. But then in uni, they don't like, I studied audio production, so you do cover live sound, but you cover other areas as well. So I when we saw the module on like post production, I fell in love with it. I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And I just loved the idea of like getting like something with no sound, like a film with no sound, and just recreating it all. Like, I found that was like so much fun, and it just opened so much possibilities. So that's kind of the path I went for. And I started working in radio as well, just because I like music so much. So I started like doing internships in radio and having my own radio shows and producing radio shows. So I just kind of went on the radio and post production kind of path, and that's how I got into sound. Actually, yeah,
Nice. Yeah,
yeah,
it's a fascinating medium, and I don't know if a whole lot of people really take time to think about how important a sense it is. Like, the voice of your mother, the voice of
mm,
your child, or the voice of a loved one, and
yeah,
the sounds in the street. Like, that we're just
yeah,
surrounded by all these different sounds, and there's so much meaning and relationship that comes from the sounds that we hear that we might not even be aware of.
yeah.
What do you can you talk a little bit more about, what it is that you act like you're putting sound to silent films, or you're building in a soundtrack, or you're working with video games. Like, what are some other ways that you work with sound?
Um, well, I think like uh, just kind of touching back on what you started with, like
Yeah,
that people
please.
don't really like realize. And we joke a lot in this job that like people realize our job like if we do it badly. Like,
Mm,
it's just something that comes in so like naturally. You're not thinking about it that much unless something's wrong,
right.
so if you go see a movie and like the sound is like well done, you're not gonna think about it. But if there's like an error in the sound or something like that, you'll be like immediately. And it's
Yeah.
funny how like, yeah, a lot of people don't really pay that much attention to it. But it's when making a film or whatever media you're doing, like if you don't have sound, it's like 50%, it's like 50-50 what you see and what you hear. um if you don't have sound, then you don't really have a movie unless it's like a silent film, and just music can like really control your emotions. Like,
Yeah.
if you have like a piece of music in certain scenes, without that piece of music, the scene can be like completely different. Like, it just dictates so much, but it's just it's pretty subtle, I guess, if you do it right.
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think with sound, that's mostly what I do. Like I mentioned, like radio as well, and I do some meditations with like different like frequencies. Like I like to,
Nice.
yeah, I like to listen to, I just put it like on YouTube. I just listen to certain frequencies as I'm kind of like falling asleep or meditating,
Hmm.
because I feel like it puts me in like certain state, and
Yeah.
I like that. I was experimenting a lot with like lucid dreaming, and
Nice.
yeah, I was also and I got pretty good at it. And then I kind of wanted to like transition to like astral projection. So I know that like there's like these binaural beats that you can
Right.
play, and it puts you like in certain state. But I haven't managed to do it by myself. It just happened like spontaneously without doing that. But yeah, that's another use that I give to sound, is like use it for to like enter certain meditative states. Yeah.
That is awesome. I've seen like the 532 megahertz frequency, and I've listened to some different binaural beats and things like that. And I have to agree that it definitely puts you into a trance like state. And if you look back into different cultures, you can see people using drumming and,
Yeah.
different drum circles and different
Yeah.
ceremonies, but there always seems to be a component of sound in there that helps us get to that certain spot like that. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if, yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead.
Yeah, no, I know that like in like the Tibetan like
Yeah.
the sound bowls. I know that
Yep.
they're tuned to like a certain frequency, and I think I'm not an expert in it, but I know kind of like the the science behind it is that well, they believe that each of those tunings, each of the frequencies that the bowl emits, it's kind of like in kind of like it matches each one of the chakras. So when you go on
Mhm.
like a sound healing session, what they do is just kind of play these different frequencies while you're laying down, so that they kind of like balance each of your energetic points that people call chakras.
Yeah, now that you think about that, I think that there's all kinds of experiments that could be done. I know that when you're sleeping, you go into like different states of brain waves, like
Yeah.
theta and beta. And I'm wondering, I'm willing to bet. I mean, I don't have a lot of money, but I'd bet $1. I would bet
Yeah.
$1 that the certain frequencies, whether it's the 532 or whether it's the sound bowls, I bet you those frequencies match up our brain waves. So if you're going to be in a lucid
Mm,
dreaming state, which is like a deep beta wave, or I'm not sure, I'm just kind of throwing that out there. But I bet you that those sound waves match up and they kind of make your brain go in tune with that sound like that, which brings us to sound waves. Like, first off, does that first part of what I said make sense? And second off, what do you know about the waves and matching up like that?
yeah, absolutely. I think it does make sense. I think, like you said, I probably there are some studies. I don't know. I haven't
Yeah,
looked
me
much
neither.
into it, but that'd be interesting to look into if there have been uh, any kind of test done before. But yeah, it totally makes sense. Just because, yeah, like you said, when we're entering different states, like an REM state or like a
Hmm.
beta state, like the brain is emitting different types of waves, and in the end, sounds are waves.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it would make sense. Yeah, absolutely.
And then that brings into the idea, like if you look at people who use like psychological techniques of like neuro linguistic programming. If I begin to talk like this, then
Yeah.
you may understand what like people start using different cadences, which is basically just changing the sound, changing the waves in the way in which we communicate. It's so fascinating how it's all interconnected like that.
Yeah.
What what can you tell us about one of the lucid dreams that you had?
Oh yeah, I can tell you a lot about that. Uh, so basically, I started like learning about lucid dream, and I was like, I was so fascinated by it. I was like, I have to do it. I have to try it, and I got pretty good at it. So basically, well, for those that are not familiar with lucid dreaming, it's kind of like kind of training yourself. Well, you can do it without training yourself. It can happen just by itself. A lot of people, most people have uh, had the experience of like waking up in their dreams, like just realizing they're dreaming, right? Um, but there's ways that you can train your brain to kind of find cues in a dream to find out that you're dreaming. So I did this like course on Mind Valley on lucid dreaming, and I read a couple books to kind of like really learn how to do it properly. And so the first thing you kind of want to do is you want to keep a dream journal, just because you could be having lucid dreams and just wake up and not realizing it. And it's kind of like a muscle. Like the more you like wake up and uh, write down your dreams and remember it like consciously, the more you're gonna remember it. Like by the second week, um, I was remembering even like 3 dreams a night just from writing down every day. And then after that, what you want to do is like kind of give your brain a cue during the day. So I would do is I put an alarm and just gonna like look at my hand when I see that alarm, gonna go like this, or I would also do like this, because in the dream it would kind of like go through. So I would do that like I don't know 10 times a day, and so that goes into your subconscious. So then you start doing it in your dream. So then you're going to be dreaming and then you're going to do that, and then you're going to realize, oh, I'm dreaming, because in your dreams, like, your brain is not very good at like replicating your hand. So you're
Mhm.
always going to see your hand, it's going to be like an extra finger, or it's going to like go through. So yeah, I started doing that. And the first lucid dream that I had after training, um I was so excited, like, when I realized that I was dreaming. I dreamt that I was like in this theater. I was in this theater with like these people like next to me, and I was like, "Oh my god, I'm dreaming!" And I did it without the reality check. These are called reality checks, where you kind of do for remembering your dreaming. I did it without the reality check. I think just from reading about lucid dreaming, I just did it in my dream. And so when I realized, I just started telling everyone, and that's like the 101 of what not to do in a lucid dream, because you freak everyone out. So I told the person next to me, "Oh my god, this is a dream." And they were so offended. They were like, "Oh, what?" And then this alarm came on, and everyone, this like it's chaos. And I woke up. And so I was like, "Okay, I gotta note down not to tell anyone in the dream that you're dreaming." But I was just so excited. And yeah, I kept having more, and you can have like kind of like like you can see patterns in your dreams. Like, I remember this was like when I was in El Salvador, and I had come back from Europe, and I kept dreaming that I was in Europe. I keep having this recurring dream. So then I wrote down in my notebook, like, whenever I dream I'm in Europe, like, be suspicious, because I'm not. And
Mhm.
so that was another reality check. So then when I was in my dream in Europe, I was like, wait a minute, I shouldn't be in Europe. So is this a dream? And then you do a check, and then you're like, yeah, this is a dream. Okay, great. I can go flying. And it's really interesting. Like, apart from having fun, you're having like this window, this access to your subconscious. So there's like a lot of like healing that you can do with it. So nightmares are basically like a suppressed version of things we have inside. It's like a suppressed part of yourself. So if you go ahead and have a nightmare, you can kind of come to terms with it. Like, as scary as it can be, you can like kind of hug that monster or whatever you see in your dream, and that's kind of like reintegrating this like dark side of yourself. So it can be like a really, really healing experience. Like, you can use it for a lot of stuff. You can also, like, I've read about people using it to heal, kind of reprogram their mind from like addictions to like cigarettes
Wow.
and stuff like that, and like training, before having to do like a speech or like sports. There's been a lot of studies on like athletes using lucid dreaming to train. And yeah, it's just such an interesting world. I really like would suggest people that are interested in it to like read about it or do a course, because it's just, apart from fun, like the fun you can have in a dream when you can control everything, like, there's a lot of like healing that you can do and things that you can come to terms with.
That sounds fascinating. How
Yeah.
how how long did it take you from like reading the books and researching to actually being able to hugging to be able to do some work on your subconscious?
Like 3 weeks. It's not that much, but you
Wow.
have to be like doing it every day.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it's not hard. Like, you'd be surprised how easily your subconscious picks up on like these reality checks and cues and everything. Like I mentioned, like the first one was just from reading the book, that
Mhm.
I did it by myself. I had just thought about lucid dreaming so much that it happened. And then I was having like one or two lucid dreams a week, just from doing it every day. And it's crazy, because like it's kind of feels like being in the matrix, because everything you touch things and they feel real. Like, I remember having this dream of being in like my childhood home, and I don't know why it wasn't even complete. When there's like a
Mhm.
3D render, and it's
Yeah.
still blue, like
Mhm.
half of it was like blue. I was like, this isn't finished, but okay, I'm gonna go here. And then I went to this plant, and I there was this fruit, and I touched it, and I was like, this is insane. I can feel how cold it is. Like, you can feel textures, you can feel like everything. Like, it's really interesting how the brain can like trick you. You can feel stuff in it. So it's really cool. And yeah, I've done a lot of different crazy things. Once I constructed this like massive like statue, like work of art, just like in like, I don't know, I'm not even like an artist, like, you know, a plastic artist, but I just constructed it and it just felt amazing. It's There's so much that you can do. It's limitless. Like you can do whatever you want there. It's really cool. It's a really cool world to like dive into.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And another point that I picked up on is that right in the beginning of that in the beginning of the story, you had mentioned that it's amazing what your subconscious picks up on. It seems like
Yeah.
you get to learn about who you are and what you're doing in waking life while you're in the dream state, which usually seems the opposite way. It's kind of
Yeah.
fascinating to think about from that angle.
Yeah.
I'm
Absolutely.
wondering, I'm wondering, so I'm a big fan of psychedelics,
Yeah.
and I really enjoy the one of the things I really enjoy about them is the different way it allows me to see myself and the way I can interact in the world. And I'm wondering what's your take on psychedelics and do you think that like a lucid dream is sort of like an acid trip or maybe like a mushroom trip, or have you thought about comparing those two?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not that experienced with like having psychedelic trips to really tell you, but it seems from the logic of it that well, when we dream, we are like, I know from what I've read that you're kind of using some DMT that's naturally in your brain, right? And in the end, psychedelics, you're taking a big dose of DMT. So it would make sense that in the end, you're kind of exploring your subconscious mind somehow. But I don't know. Like, I think you would be able to maybe
Mm.
tell us more about it, since you've had more more experience with that. What kind of like psychedelics, like like psilocybin, or what are you talking about specifically?
Mostly psilocybin. Like I've
Yeah.
I've tried like lots of different kinds, but in the last few years I've concentrated mostly on that. And it
Okay.
seems to me, I'm sorry, yeah,
No, no. And have you ayahuasca? Have you tried ayahuasca as well?
I haven't. I
Okay.
grow ayahuasca and like I
Oh.
for me, like I got both plants and I figured out like I've tried to make it multiple times and I've got the purge part right, but not so much the trip part right.
Oh. Okay. Yeah.
So I figured to myself, like, you know what? Once I figure out how to make it, then I'll be ready to take it. But so I've been reading up and trying to learn different recipes on it. And I figure eventually I'll get the recipe right. And when I do get the recipe right, that's like the world telling me, like, okay, now you're ready to take it. Like you figured out how to make it. Now you can take it. But I,
Hmm.
I haven't I haven't tried it so far. But I have
Okay.
tried lots of psilocybin and
Psilocybin. Yeah.
LSD, some derivatives, some analogs of LSD.
Okay.
I've not tried ketamine. So pretty much just those ones, really.
Yeah.
No, I've never tried the 2CBs or anything like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I do find it fascinating. I think that on high doses, that it is like a lucid dream in a lot of ways. Not so
Yeah.
much that you see unfinished walls, or not so much that you get to see entire dreamscapes, but that you have more of a open eyes and closed eyed geometric shapes. Like there's been times where I've taken them and it's been such a strong dose that I can have my eyes open and I see like a tetrahedron just like moving in front of me. And I'm like,
Hmm.
what is this thing right here? And it's accompanied by this whoa, 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 like this crazy sound, like a helicopter. And and then for me, it's like you have these incredible insights like, oh, I guess mathematics was not invented. It was discovered because here's this
Hmm.
geometrical shape right here. This is probably what people saw. This is probably how people began to figure out like the Pythagorean theorem. And then you start
Hmm.
thinking about the rites of Eleusis or some of these sacred like secret cults or whatever, where they were just potentially cultivating mushrooms and then like seeing these mathematical equations and figuring things out. Or and then you get to once you begin to have an insight like that, then you can go back and read the works of Plato or some of these ancient Greek texts and learn about the different harmonics. Like, wow, it's so amazing that the planets are perfectly spaced apart, that we can make music chords on based
Hmm.
on those. Like, well, I think we're all connected, Natalia, and we
Yeah.
have the insight the same way you can lucid dream and create a relationship with your subconscious. I think that psychedelics provide us a bridge where we
Hmm.
can understand that you don't really come into this world, you come out of it and you're part of it. And all the solutions are around you if you're willing to do the work and look for them. So is that too crazy? Am I freaking
No,
you
not at
out?
all. That makes
Okay,
total
good.
perfect sense. Yeah, I only tried when I was living in Holland.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, well, mushrooms are just legal there.
Yeah.
So I did. But I was too young. I was
Right.
18,
Yeah.
and I wasn't even thinking about that it was possible
Right.
to like heal or like figure this transcendental truth, like I was just, it was recreational with like some friends. It was
Absolutely.
it was cool and everything, but yeah, I was mentally, I wasn't where I am right now. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I do like reading, even though I haven't gotten much into doing it. Like I do love reading about it. I
Yeah.
just bought this book called the DMT, the Spirit Molecule, which I'm looking forward to read. I haven't started it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And I just there's this YouTube channel. There's just this person like narrating psychedelic trips. I love listening to it. Uh, there's this one that really stands out. That was so crazy. It was this guy. That he was saying how he did this like DMT trip with his friend, and so he did the trip, and DMT is like very intense. It's like half an
Right.
hour, but it's like all at once. Like it's really intense. Um, I've never done it either, but I like hearing about it. And so this guy says that he went into this like world of DMT, and he saw kind of like his life in these different like film strips, like different like frames. And he got into this place where he kind of saw like the multiverse. Like he saw all these different versions of
Yeah.
like his life, of that, of where he could have gone, and like all these different paths and everything. And it just came to this point where he forgot where which one was the one he came from. And he kind of started freaking out because it was like, what, like how do I know where to go back? There's just so many of them, right? And like this voice came up and told him like, oh, no, it's okay, like, try to remember. And he was, okay, you are uh John, you were in New York, you were doing DMT. And then he was like, but do you come from the world where you were doing it like at the studio or like at the living room? And he was like, oh, at the studio. And then he's like, okay, we'll take you back there. And then he came back, started coming back, and he was back at the studio. But then he realized when he woke up, he was like, I wasn't here. I was in the living room. So he said he felt like he came to just like one kind of frame different from the from the life he had initially done when he did the DMT. It was such a crazy story. Can send you the link afterwards. But I love like hearing all about it, and I also really like hearing about near death experiences. I follow these channels that narrate near death experiences, and
Hmm.
I find there are so many similarities with what people experience in both in psychedelic trips and in your death experiences. And I find that fascinating because it makes me think that both can accessing a similar place or a similar kind of state. I don't know. But yeah, absolutely. And I really feel like we are like in a renaissance of psychedelics now,
Yeah.
with how much it's been taken more seriously now, like medically, and how it can like really be used for healing, and just get to the root of stuff, of especially when it comes to a lot of mental illnesses, instead of just masking symptoms. And I think that's great. I think that it's great that that kind of taboo is kind of dissipating a little bit. And yeah, it's awesome. I think it's great to talk about it so that more people can just start feeling more comfortable about talking about it.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The stories around it, while sometimes they can be, frightening. I think sometimes the psychedelic stories that people tell, they frighten people that have never done psychedelics before because they don't understand like what it's like. And if you hear a story like, "Oh man, I felt like I died and was reborn. People, that freaks people out sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's not uncommon to have the feeling of time slicing, and in some ways I think the psychedelic experience, be it a near death experience, because that's a psychedelic experience in itself. It's a life changing experience where you're almost rebuilding who you are. Like, I think when you have a near death experience or someone close to you dies, then part of you dies, but
Yeah.
something builds back inside of you. Like, that part of you died and it left a chasm, and now all of a sudden there's a hole in your heart, or there's a hole somewhere, but sooner or later something fills that gap and it changes you. And I think the same thing happens on a psychedelic experience. I've had similar experiences where I've gotten to see every decision I've made and where it would have taken me. And it was almost like I was seeing it from a third person perspective, but at the
Hmm.
same time feeling what it would be like. And it was like, and it's so much to take in, because it's like doing something for the first time. Like, you don't really process it to the point where you thoroughly understand it, but it's happening. And I remember thinking to myself, like, oh my God, if that's the first girl I kissed, that's what my life would have been look like. Or, oh my gosh, if my son never died, then this is what it would have been like. Or if I would have done this one thing at work, then that would have happened. But
Yeah.
just like branching out in like this time dilated slicing motion where you can see it all. And it's just this, it, it leaves you with an understanding that the world in which we're functioning and operating in is but a slice of what is possible. And if you look at all the if you look at a lot of different scriptures and a lot of different sci-fi, like, you can see how they kind of come together. And I really think that in some ways, I think that psychedelics not only is having a renaissance right now, but if you look back in times, you can see where people have accessed psychedelics to move the world forward. And I think that's where we are. Like, we're like in this sort of stagnant area where we have found the world of materialism is the predominant way in which we see the world. But we're breaking out of that. The same way a silkworm spins a web and gets caught in it, so too do we as a society spin this web, and then we get caught in it. And now you can't move, but soon you break out of it. And I think psychedelics are a big part of that. And I do think it's good for healing. Let me ask you this. There's one issue that I kind of see with psychedelics, and I'm not a doctor, but it seems to me that in the world of pharmaceuticals and in the world of clinical trials where they're trying the new drugs and things, they always say this. Okay, if you're schizophrenic, or if you have bipolar, if you have any sort of mental illness, then you cannot be in this study because you could freak out. It could be bad. But
Yeah.
that seems like bullshit to me, because those are the people that need it the most. And in a weird way, it seems like that's how they're glossing over the clinical trials. Like, look, let's make sure we don't have any at-risk people in these trials.
Hmm.
But, well, then what are we doing? Like, these drugs probably should be for those people. And it just seems kind of odd to me. Does that seem odd to you, or what do you think?
Um, I think if I was, for example, if I was gonna like be taking care of someone that was doing this trial, I would be wary if they would be
Mhm.
like yeah, like I could see why they do it, but I think, yeah, I agree that they shouldn't be left out, but maybe like do like another test just with them or something,
Yeah,
but very controlled, because yeah, I think with schizophrenia, I could see why it could go kind of bad. I do also feel like psychedelics can definitely help heal the world, but I do also think that they're not for absolutely everyone.
right.
I think we had a bit of
Yeah,
a
kind of
yeah,
froze up
yeah.
there for a second.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, just I think that um yeah, I think it's for a good part of the population could benefit from them, but I do feel like maybe it's not in some people's path to take them. Um that it Yeah, maybe it's just not. I don't know, seeing it from like a more, I don't know, kind of global kind of view, maybe some people are not, it's not in meant to be in their life. I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah, it
But
totally
it
does.
it would be interest. Yeah, I think. it would be interesting to, yeah, do tests with people with serious illnesses, but I think they'd have to be monitored really closely and like just make sure that they're safe, and that they're given the support after. I think more than just like the trip itself, it's kind of like in the integration after, that requires a lot of support. So maybe that's why they're kind of left out in some of the trials, because
Hmm.
they know that they have to really be there with someone, because a lot of of the effects could happen months after, weeks after. So yeah, I agree, but I also see why they do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just have like a little pet peeve there. I'm like, gosh, I think that these people could benefit from them. They probably need them the most.
Yeah, no,
Y-
that's true. That's true. But I think just the brain is just so complex.
Yeah,
There's
agreed.
just so much where we don't know about, or like where it can go, where it can take you, that I think it should be taken with a bit of caution, definitely, when, especially in these cases. But for most of the population, they've been proven to be pretty safe. So
Yeah,
yeah.
and I think that you know, while there is sort of a renaissance happening, I think it's important to say it's not a panacea. It's not going to fix everything, and there could be some nefarious use. Like if you look back to like in the '60s and stuff, when you had like Charles Manson and
Yeah.
Jonestown, and there are some knuckleheads out there that are smart enough to use psychedelic drugs to program people, or at least
Yeah.
use some sort of external inputs that they can put in people. And look, not everybody being on a psychedelic experience is something that I normally do alone. There are recreational ways to do it. If you're going to go to a concert, you can totally have fun. I have nothing against that. But if you're going to do like a heavy dose and you're with somebody you don't trust, now you're back into the problems of set and setting. And if you
Yeah.
are with somebody you don't trust, like there are some pretty crazy things that can happen, I think.
Yeah.
So it's something to be cautious about. I know in the 60s the CIA had set up these crazy experiments where they would take these guys that were going to see like hookers, and they would dose them up with like large amounts of LSD, and then like and like
Oh my
film
god.
them, and like it's so crazy,
Yeah.
right? And so I think also oh gosh, I can't think of the guy's name. It's Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber, and he was this guy that was in the United States. I think it was in the '80s that he was sending mail bombs to certain senators or whatever, and he was part of these experiment. I think they did some experiments in the '60s, and he was part of like these LSD experiments. And so there is some literature that says like, hey, this could be a huge problem for society if we just tune in and turn on all these people and they no longer want to participate in our thing. And maybe there's something there. What do you think that what so let me shift gears for a little bit here. Like, what do you think we could learn about sound by combining sound with psychedelics?
Um, I think I don't know if I think it would be something very personal. Like
Hmm.
I've read a lot about um people like kind of like playing music during like psychedelic trips, and just kind of understanding and like experiencing that song differently.
Yeah.
Like a lot of in this kind of like channel where they narrate psychedelic trips, a lot of them are like DMT, and they're like 7-10 minutes, right? So they usually play a song so that it so you can kind of have some sense of time left, because you
Yeah.
kind of go into a place where there's no time. But hearing the song, it makes you think, okay, it's been like 4 or 5 minutes, so you just pick a long song or everything. And yeah, like a lot of people can narrate how they just experience the song in a completely different way. So I think it would be more like of a personal experience and relationship with sound and music,
Hmm.
and really like understanding it differently. Like you're in this different, your brain is in a different state, so it's catching up, it's processing this like sound information differently. So I think more than finding out something like global for everyone, apart from some things that we already know that we're all kind of like vibrations, we are kind of sound in
Mm,
itself.
yeah.
I think it would be more like how you change your relationship to sound and to music. I think that's what most people could take out of a psychedelic trip, relating to sound, is your relationship to it, and maybe being more mindful of what you hear, you know, um, and just what you consume in general. Um, so yeah, I think that that would be it.
That's beautiful, Natalia. Changing your relationship to sound. Like, when I change my relationship to anybody in the world, it changes the way I feel about it. Most of the time it makes that relationship much more rich and much more rewarding. So that would be something that I think could benefit not only your personal relationship, but it might have profound effects on your life later in life. And I've read some stories about people that, they there's this thing called synesthesia, where people that take psychedelic trips, sometimes they will see sounds, or they will taste colors. It's
Yeah,
almost like the inputs are kind of moved around there, and maybe that comes from sort of processing sounds in Broca's area. Maybe that comes from processing taste in the visual cortex or something like that. But that might be an incredible way to create art. And there's also some experiments of people that are. I saw this one experiment where this gentleman was on LSD and he was drawing stuff, and then it showed him draw like a sketch at 1 hour in, and then a sketch at 2 hours in, and then a sketch at 4 hours in. And at 4 hours in, it was like this sort of Picasso-esque, looking thing. It was really beautiful. I was like, wow, like, maybe you can begin to see the world different through altered states of consciousness. Maybe that's what we need. But yeah, have you ever thought about setting up some experiments with sound and psychedelics?
I've never thought about it per se, but I think now that you mention it, it would be pretty interesting,
Yeah,
definitely, on how like maybe how in this like trials that they're making, something that's very controlled, where you can, you know, get data from different patients, you know, to kind of compare it, how maybe playing certain frequencies or playing certain music, you know, if you play one that's on like a major scale or like a minor scale, or if you're just playing like a binaural beat, how that can affect kind of like your trip, you know, and what you can do in it. I think that would be pretty interesting. I don't think that has been done before, and it sounds like a pretty good idea.
yeah, I think you should be the first person to do it.
Yeah,
Like,
okay. I'm up for it. Yeah.
so I guess, like, if we just play out this thought experiment a little bit, you'd have to have a control. Maybe if you had someone in a room and you played Beethoven, you could measure their brain waves on a EKG or one of those machines, something like that. And then
Yeah.
if they were tripping, then you measure it again. Or how would we set it up? How would it look?
I think I would, the way I would do it would be more like having like, say, to say a number, like 10 people take psilocybin and do it without any kind of like musical or oral stimulation, and then have 10 people um, do it with um, and with a certain type, so with happy music, for example,
Yeah,
or with like a like tonal chords that can would kind of evoke positive emotions, and then kind of have another 10 that would have it with a kind of like more sad music, and just and then kind of like see from the reports afterwards how it affected their experience. I think that's that's how I would do it, more than seeing what's actually going in the brain. It's kind of like what they experienced in the
yeah.
trip. Yeah. And see what kind of pattern can come out of that.
I like that. It seems to me, from the people that I've spoken with, there's all kinds of like playlists people have for like a 4 hour trip or an 8 hour trip. And I bet if we started looking at some of those, you could begin to see the patterns. However, I don't know of any, I know almost all the clinical trials where they bring someone in for their set in the setting, a lot of the places that are providing psychedelic therapy to people are providing music. But I don't know any one of them that have an audio artist like yourself that
Yeah.
would, I think that that would really add value to the test. And I think that that would bring more comfort to the people that are going through the therapy. And, I would think that everyone from pharmaceutical companies that are doing the testing to, you know, home, home people at home that are helping people could use that. I'm going to talk to some people that do clinical trials and tell them to talk to you.
Absolutely. I
That
would
would
be
be
so
amazing,
down to that. Like,
right?
that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it would be really interesting. Apart from an amazing experience for me, that would be like interesting, I think, for like for to see what comes out of that, because just to have like a holistic approach to that kind of the kind of therapy of psychedelic therapy, just to include all the senses, that makes a lot of sense. And given how much sound can influence what we what we experience just normally, just in day-to-day life, like it's inevitably going to have an impact on the experience. And if sound can, certain frequencies or certain music can influence positively a psychedelic therapy, then it's an easy and a good tool to use.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of anchoring. You know how sometimes if you smell, smell is like the closest sense tied to memory. But I've also had the same sort of response when sometimes you hear a song, you think of a time that you had with somebody.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if you could, if the sound during like, let's say that someone had a big problem with anxiety
Hmm.
and they went and they had psychedelic therapy and it helped them with their anxiety. I'm wondering if you were to implant a song or tie or anchor a sound.
Sound, yeah.
Yeah, you anchor that sound during the therapy, and then when people down the line in a month from now or 6 months from now, they begin to feel the anxiety, they can play
Yeah.
back that sound and it would put them back in that state. I bet you there's something there.
Absolutely. That makes complete sense. Absolutely. And it ties back to what we were speaking at the beginning with the lucid dreaming, of how easily your
Yes.
subconscious can, like, when you have access to your subconscious, how you can plant stuff in there, like in one of these books that are, I don't know if it's the book or the course, with this like lucid dreaming expert called Charlie Morley. He was saying how one of his students, um, he was addicted to smoking, and in a lucid dream, what he did was like call up his brain. He was like, okay, I want to speak to my brain. And then this kind of like representation of the brain came up, and it was like sassy, and like it had a personality and everything. And he told him, like, okay, I don't have much time. Whenever I want a cigarette, like, just make me not think of it. Make me think of something else. And the brain just went like, okay. And then he woke up and everything, and he was like 2 years cigarette free. Like, he would just, he says that he would go to the store and think, oh, okay, I need cigarettes. And then suddenly he'd be at home and be like, oh, I forgot to buy those cigarettes. Like, his brain actually made him think of something else when he wanted like a cigarette or wanted to buy cigarettes. So when you're in a psychedelic trip, you're also having this kind of like access to the subconscious. And it's a great opportunity to like program something like that. And sound is definitely a good tool to use,
Yeah.
and be like, uh you know listen, whenever you listen to this sound, just remember that you're good, remember that you're calm, that you're okay, that there's nothing going wrong. And something like that would be, yeah, definitely a good trial to make, to see if that works. If Yeah, definitely, you have a great idea there.
Well, I got it from listening to you talk about lucid dreaming, so it's
Yeah.
just as much your idea as it is mine. It's fat like this kind of conversation makes me so hopeful for the future. I think we're only scratching the surface of what we're capable of, whether
Yeah.
it's lucid dreaming or psychedelics or using the senses that we already have to solve major problems. It seems like in our society that we have farmed out our problems to like coping strategies. When I look at Western medicine, it seems that the idea, and don't get me wrong, there's great. I'm so stoked that we have doctors and pharmaceutical companies that can help us when when we're ill, but
Yeah.
it does seem like on some level that the strategy of Western medicine is to provide a coping mechanism instead of a
Yeah.
solution. It's like I'm going to give you this pill, And then you can, even though you hate your job, this pill will allow you to wake up, feel pretty good about yourself, and go do that thing that you hate. Whereas a psychedelic medicine or some of the Eastern traditions, they allow you to take something and be like, what am I doing? This is
Yeah.
horrible. I shouldn't do this. I'm going to
Yeah.
stop doing this. I'm not going to take a pill
Absolutely.
that makes me. Have
Yeah.
you noticed that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I totally agree. I think the pharmaceutical companies, when it comes to like more physical illness, then they're great. If you have an
Right.
infection, you want to take,
Absolutely.
antibiotics, if it's gotten too bad. If you have a cut, you want to put something there, that's great. But when it comes to mental health, yeah, it's definitely like a whole other story. I think we should be looking into other things that get to the root of you. And everyone is it's like an individual person, like it's an individual, y- with your individual thoughts, your individual life journey. So if you have something that, instead of like numbing you or just doing something that's going to have the same effect on everyone, you see like a psychedelic trip is just so individual. Like, not no one person has the same experience. So it just gets to the root of you personally, of who you really are. And that's exactly, I think, what people with mental illness, some, or even if they don't have mental illness, I think just in general, I think you shouldn't be limited to like people with like anxiety or depression. I think um anyone can benefit from it. Like, you can just feel okay with your life, just feel fine, but there's always room to expand and to know more, and to just get to the essence of who you really are. And I think with mental health, the closer you get to truly connecting a person with their essence, with who they really are, the more likely they're to succeed in healing, or like getting better, or just expanding. I think, and of course, an antidepressant is not going to do that.
Yeah. It's the brain chemistry and the different neurotransmitters that just coursing through our brain. The whole idea of it, Natalia, is so fascinating to me. And the more that I think about, my brain is racing on the topic of sound. And I'm even though you and I are talking, we're using words, it's just kind of mouth noises, right? Like we're just making noises with our
Yeah.
mouths, and like you can decode that and understand it and know if it's a good sound or a bad sound.
Yeah.
And when you look at like the ayahuasca ceremonies, the shaman will usually sing like ikaros and like these
Yeah.
little songs that have been around for a while. In
Yeah.
Tibetan, they have like the different bowls. And so when we think about, have you ever, like, there's been times where I've heard someone sing and I start crying. I don't even know why.
Yeah.
It's just like a
Yeah.
beautiful sound. So
Yeah.
I think that the idea of sound therapy has always been with us. It's just that
Yeah.
we have lost touch with it. And I really admire and think it's beautiful what you said about someone aligning with their essence and
Yeah.
healing themselves. Like it does seem like mental illness is just like, we're probably all mentally ill in some way, but it does seem
Yeah.
like the people that are mentally ill are just trapped in this negative feedback loop that they
Yeah.
can't get out of.
I think they're just very far away from realizing who they are. I think
Mm.
I think they're in, and some of us are closer, some of us are like that, and then someone with depression is just very far, very far, not just very not connected to their essence. I think and I think that's where psychedelics can help, because I think it connects you to your essence, because you really navigate who you are and what you want. And definitely we're so connected to sound. Like, I have, like, in my shower, I have like a Bluetooth,
Yeah.
like a speaker, because I know that like my day is gonna go differently if I just put this like songs that make me happy, and just so when I take a shower, I'm listening to like 4 or 5 songs of a playlist. And I know my day is just gonna get better from there, because I'm already like in a good mood. I'm in a good position. Um, and it's just so like ingrained in us. Like, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and with her, we really try gentle parenting, um, but she knows when my tone has changed. Like, I'm so
Yeah.
sweet to her usually, but then when she gets naughty, I don't even scream. I just change the tone of my voice, and she is immediately like, "Oh, there's something wrong. I
Yeah.
did something wrong." Like, because mommy has changed the tone of her voice, and she's like, don't speak to me like that. I'm like, I'm not even yelling, I'm just being assertive. You need to do this, you need to do that. She's like, I want you to speak sweet to me. And that seems to be enough to, like, get her to behave. And it's just ingrained in us, sound, and how it affects, like, our feelings and how we process information.
Yeah, like nails on a chalkboard, right? Like,
Oh wow,
we're
yeah.
like
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
so, I think that is it fair to say that you have an interest in gaming? Like, you work at Electronic Arts, right? And like, can you talk about what you do there?
Oh,
No?
no.
Okay, don't talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible that that like the metaverse seems big right now? I wonder if it might be possible in the future for someone to simulate what a psychedelic trip is like.
I think there's already some. I think I remember, like, reading a bit about that. I think there's already. Okay, I don't know if I dreamt this, but I remember when you start lucid dreaming a lot, you start, like, thinking, like, did this happen, or did I
Yeah.
dream it? Like, yeah. But I'm pretty sure I read something about some, like, trials of, like, um playing a psychedelic experience to people, and them having, like, a similar response to actually having a psychedelic trip with the substance. Yeah. And I also read, like, 2 days ago, I was listening to one of these trip reports, and there was one where this guy, he was semi lucid in his dream, and he ate a mushroom in his dream, and he had, like, an experience, like, in his dream. It's like he had, like a psilocybin experience. It was really interesting of how, like, in your brain you can, like, create that. And definitely with the metaverse, I think they're already trying that, of, like, kind of recreating the experience. But I don't know how that would work, just because every experience is so unique and individual. uh but I remember reading something about that.
Yeah. I think they're gonna try, but I think it would be like making a copy of a copy. Like it kind of like you put
Yeah.
in a copy and then it comes out kind of shady a little bit. You're like,
Yeah.
this is just a
Yeah.
copy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know how that would work, but I remember people trying that already. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it seems like it, and in some ways, it seems like that might be what the whole metaverse is just this attempt to experience reality that's not reality, and yeah, I think that I think there's a lot of exploration to be done on the psychedelic frontier, but it can be scary, and like you said, it's not for everybody, but there's a lot we can learn there, and I think we've only begun to scratch the surface. I think
Yeah.
that I have a niece that's getting ready to go to college and she wants to go for sport medicine. And I'm
Mm,
trying to get her to write a letter like you should be incorporating psychedelics into sports medicine. Like we've
yeah.
already spoken a little bit about lucid dreaming and how people are using that to better their performance, but if you look at the way psilocybin has been used in the past, by hunters and gatherers, like a small amount. And even I was talking to this girl, Abigail, who's doing some studies on LSD, and she says that you see more, which makes
Mm,
kind of sense. Like if your pupils become dilated, you're getting more light in. That's having some effect on your brain. And I don't know if you've ever had the sensation of sometimes if your eyes stay dilated for too long, like you get a big headache because I think you're getting too much light in there. But it is also allowing you to see more. And if you're taking in more information, you're going to have, at least in my opinion, you're going to have more understanding of your environment. In fact, I think I should write something on this. Like, I think if your eyes stay dilated longer, you're seeing more around you. And another way
mhm.
to say that is that you have, like, I think that's synonymous with intuition. You ever like have something like something's going to happen and then it does? I think you're seeing it happen, or you're seeing triggers, or you're seeing markers out there that other people aren't seeing. It's not that you have some extra, it's not that you're being told by God what's going to happen, but you're picking up on biomarkers of some kind that
Mhm.
other people can't see. And it would make sense that if your eye, and look, it's all over the literature, like, hey, that person's eyes are wide open, or that person sees everything. Like
Yeah.
it's I don't know. I have to think more about it, but I think that there's something there. Is that too
Yeah.
crazy to think of? What do you think?
No, I don't think it's crazy to think of at all. I agree that we've only touched the surface of of what we know. I think in 100 years we're gonna look
Yeah.
back, 200 years, and we're gonna be like, wow, we knew so little back then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It would
absolutely.
be it would
Yeah.
be sometimes I think that the psychedelic therapy that people are going through is a way that we're evolving, and it's helping us to incorporate all the senses. It's helping us to incorporate the ability to see ourselves and the other people around us. And I think that that makes for a better world. You had said something earlier about um people that are maybe have a mental illness, they seem far away. I thought that was
Mhm.
such an astute thing to say. Do you know people in your life that have had problems with depression? Like, how did you get to that insight? That seems like a very deep insight.
I think we all know someone or has
Yeah.
have someone close to that. But I think it- I don't know. It just kind of makes sense to me. I don't know if I like came to a I don't know when I came to that conclusion. What it just kind of was what kind of like seems logical to me. Of I guess from reading books about what makes you feel whole or happy or content with your life, they all kind of just come to the conclusion that the closer you are to your essence, the more fulfilled you will feel. And that makes sense to me. I think I've always been a person that has a problem not like doing things that I don't want to do. Like it's
Mhm.
something that really bothers me. Like I've always been like, if I don't want to do something, then it's just it I can't like, so it's just something that makes sense to me, um, that the closer you are to who you are as an individual, the better you're going to feel, like the better your life is going to be. um, so yeah, I can't tell you something specific of how I came to that, but I think just from like reading about it, it makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know if it does to other people, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you're really gonna enjoy that book. DMT, the spirit molecule.
Yeah.
He gets really into, especially if you like trip reports, because the middle of that book is all about the reports that people have had, and like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so fascinating to read the different ideas and the similarities and I was actually really lucky. I got to I interviewed Dr. Rick Strassman about that book and some other
Oh,
books,
wow.
and
Okay. Wow.
he
Amazing.
yeah, and he gets into he's got a couple other books out, and one thing we spoke about that we haven't covered on our talk yet is the different beings people come in contact with, and some people get a little freaked out because they're like, "What do you mean you're talking to these other beings that come and hang out with you?"
Yeah.
And he goes in depth and he starts breaking it down on a biblical level. The Hebrew Torah, he talks about the different prophets in there. And I had asked him, why is it that you are equating these beings in these psychedelic trips towards the prophets in the Torah? And he goes, that's a great question. He goes, I think that that when you're in a psychedelic trip, if you meet a being in there, you should know who that being is, because then you can have a conversation with that being that being can help you with. And
Yeah.
it just it's a fact. It's like you said, we're just scratching the surface of it, Natalia, and
Yeah.
it blows my mind. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
as
Yeah.
we're getting close to landing the plane here, Natalia, I always ask people, where can they find you? What do you have coming up? And what are you most excited about?
Hmm. Okay. Well, they can find me, I guess, like on Instagram. I'm not like that, active on YouTube or anything like that, like a channel, but yeah, I'd be happy to accept people on Instagram if they want to connect. Um, and coming up, I don't know, like I want to continue making like short films. That's
Yeah.
definitely something I want to continue doing, and I'm very interested in doing like films that kind of like when people see it, they find kind of some healing. I don't know. Like I did
Yeah.
this short film for the quarantine, for the 2020, which is the one I won the WIF for, and that one we we told the story of how the pandemic, which was very scary at the time. This was first 5 months in the pandemic was seen by a child, so my daughter. So I just kind of like imagined how she would see it so innocent, and really what it comes down to was that she saw it like as a great time because she got to spend more time with us and play with us. And I just try to, and a lot of people told me like that they cried so much when they saw it, and that they just felt like this, like they they were able to take out a lot of the fear and negative feelings that they were feeling during the pandemic. So I would love to continue doing that through film, and like doing movies and short films, and just about these kind of topics, um, that people can see and kind of relate to, and just kind of have this kind of like healing with it. I would love to continue doing that. There's been so many changes in my life this past year. I moved to a whole new country, starting a new job, and doing all of this, that I haven't had much time to really get in the production side of stuff. But I have a couple of scripts that I've written about that. So that's kind of where I want to head from here.
That sounds
Yeah.
are you okay on time?
Yeah,
You want
yeah,
to talk? Okay,
sure.
let's talk more about the films that you have done right there. So that film was called Ghosts. Was that the name of
Yeah,
that
yeah,
film?
that's it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
And so maybe we could walk people through like what made you decide to make that film when you could tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. What really made us decide is that there was a like a local um competition to use your phones, because there I don't know how the quarantine was in different places, but in El Salvador it was pretty strict. You couldn't leave your house except for like 2 days a week, according to your ID.
Wow.
And you could only go to the supermarket or the pharmacy. So we had nothing to make that film. We filmed it with like a phone and whatever we had in the house, which was my daughter, and whatever else was in the house. Um, but that gave us an opportunity to really be creative and really focus on the script and on what was being said and the sentiment of the film. Um, and nowadays you can do nice stuff with a phone. Like we competed later in other festivals with people that had used cameras for their films, and we were still able to win. So there's so much you can do now with an iPhone, seriously. Like
Yeah.
um so that's kind of what got us into it. We were like, oh yeah, that'd be fun to make something like that. And when we uploaded, like the response was pretty big in El Salvador. Like we were in the newspapers, they were sharing it like, oh, they made this film. And yeah, it was great. So we decided to enter other festivals. um, and so we ended up winning also the first place on the Cinephone Film Festival in Spain. um, and just other festivals in general. And yeah, that's kind of what brought us to it. Just seeing that was like, oh yeah, let's do that. It wasn't like something we had planned or anything, and we didn't think it would have that response either. But I think, going back to where we were talking, I just like, instead of doing a film that I thought people would like, I just did something that was very true to what I was feeling at the time. I just like sat down and like wrote, just trying to remember how I felt when I was little, and there was things that I didn't understand going on, like difficult things that for the adults, but how I saw it differently. Uh, in El Salvador, we had like two big earthquakes when I was little, and all of this, and just trying to connect to that and trying to connect to my daughter and everything, just making it very personal, very true to yourself. And just when you do stuff from that space, just people connect to it. Like, so yeah, my advice for people trying to do films is just don't try and make a film thinking of will people like this or not. Just do something true to what you're feeling or what you're thinking, make it very personal, and people are going to connect to it. Like I was seeing this interview with Quentin Tarantino, and when they asked him like what advice would you give, he was also saying like just make it very personal. Like you wouldn't think so, but Pulp Fiction is a personal story. I just like transformed it into this other thing, but in its essence is very personal, and that's how people connect to like art that you do.
Yeah, that's great advice, and I think everybody should check out that film. I like what you said about I like everything that you said about that particular film, but one part that really caught my attention was that you want to make films that heal people. Like
Yeah.
what does that mean?
I think it's just that when people see it, there's just something about the film that connected to you, that you just like feel better afterwards. I don't know
Yeah.
how to put it in words. I recently watched this one, Captain Fantastic, with Viggo Mortensen. I don't know if you've seen it.
Um,
Oh man, you should see it. It
okay.
came out in like 6 years ago, and I only just saw it. But just at the end, you just I don't know how to describe the feeling that you have at the end of watching a movie that you've connected with on some level, and you just like feel better. You just, that's kind of what I would like to do.
Yeah, it seems like, I know some, it seems to me like a lot of the big blockbuster films, they have like just tragedy ingrained in them, and sometimes
Yeah,
I leave feeling worse, or I'm feeling
exactly.
gross about my
Yeah,
life or about people. It's like, why
yeah,
would somebody make that?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Oh, I hate watching like horror films or this kind of
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, I hate it. But I think there's like a lot of cinema that it's done from that space, even like, like commercial cinema. I think it just kind of depends on the film. I think there's so much like in the world, there's just so much of everything.
Yeah.
But definitely, if if I was to continue making movies or films, I would want them to have some that kind of like emotion and connection to people.
Yeah, in Hawaii, one thing I really love about living here is that there's no billboards. So if you're driving down
Yeah,
the street, like there's nothing that is competing for your attention
yeah,
constantly. It's like you have time to think without being bombarded by messages that want you to buy something, or that are telling you don't look right, or that you don't have enough. And
yeah,
when I go back to California, sometimes like I realize like, God, I just feel like all kind of
yeah,
anxiety or stuff. And I realize like, oh, there's something trying to grab my attention
yeah.
every second over here.
Mhm.
And it seems the way in which, at least at least where, when I go back to the mainland, it seems that like the only way things can get your attention is to be a little bit more like pornographic in nature. Not that it's actual pornographic, but
Yeah,
it's obtuse and it's trying to grab your attention. And so, I think that is one way the society has gone wrong, especially in film and in art, is that they're trying to grab your attention and make you do something without you knowing at it. So they have to be more and more abrasive. But when you see good films like that, you realize how powerful of a medium it is and what it can do. Like it can have the opposite effect. We could be surrounded by beautiful billboards that have like
mm,
paintings of families and so yeah, I really think that is something that I would love to see you do more of, and I wish more people would do more of.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's where we're heading, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so. I
Yeah.
think so. Well, Natalia, do you have anything else? Do you have anything else you want to cover before we go?
No, I think we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
And it's been great talking to you. Yeah, this is such a great channel, and I'm gonna continue watching whatever you put up. Definitely.
Me too. And I hope everyone, I'll link to is there a place where people can go to watch your film?
Yeah, yeah. I'll send you the link.
Okay, and then I'll
Yeah,
put it in the show notes there. And then let's sometimes I'll do some panels or whatever, but we should bring on some other people and talk about what a clinical trial would look like with someone
yeah,
that actually builds them and someone that does sound, and maybe we could form some kind of connection there because I think you'd be great
absolutely.
at it and that could
Yeah,
be something that helps the community. So,
definitely. I am so up for it. You just let me know,
yeah.
and I'll be there.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll read more about that as well.
Yeah.
And find more stuff of clinical trials that are already happening, and just really be on it. And yeah, it will definitely be a cool thing to do.
That would be super cool. So that's all
Yeah,
we got for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for hanging out with both of us. Check out Natalia's film. Connect with her on Instagram. And I think we're all thankful that we got cool people out there creating beautiful things that make the world a little bit better. So awesome. That's what we got. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Aloha.
bye.
All right, let me shut that part.